All right, I'm glad you're still with us here. For those that have been with us right from 6:30 when Morning at NTV got underway. It's time now for the Kickstarter, and the discussion is on analyzing the National Identification Security System as well as examining citizens' registration and data consolidation. I'll be introducing my guest very shortly, but the concept of a legal identification system hinges on its ability to enable individuals to establish their identity using credentials officially recognized by law or regulation as valid proof of a legal identity. The initiation of the National Security Identification System project seemed to have been intended to address emerging security threats and enhance public services. However, it sparked human rights concerns, including increased unlawful surveillance control over citizens. As Uganda embarks on a nationwide registration drive this July to renew the National Identification System, Unwanted Witness, in a report done in relation to this, offers an incisive analysis of the National Security Identification System and the forthcoming New Generation National ID project. Ms. Freda Nalumansi Mugambe, she's a research and advocacy lead at Unwanted Witness Uganda, is here to help us understand what are the pain points and what needs to be done to remove them. You're most welcome to the program.
Thank you so much again.
How are we doing?
Good. Good morning, viewers.
The topic is a full plate, analyzing National Identification Security System. What are the pain points right now?
Thank you so much. Our paper comes at a time when it coincides with the mass enrollment that is set to happen at the end of this month actually. Obviously characterized by changes, because we anticipated that they would start the mass enrollment and renewal process last year. Much earlier, yes. There have been changes, and obviously due to hiccups here and there. But still, this gives us an opportunity with the paper that we launched recently, last year actually, last month, yes. And we highlight some human rights concerns and significant barriers that many Ugandans face in terms of accessing the national IDs, but as well as essential services. One of the things that we found are the exclusionary tendencies in the system. Given, for example, the mandatory nature of use of these IDs without viable options. With this, what it implies is that many Ugandans who may not necessarily be able to afford these IDs, given the high fees, would be excluded out of critical activities. For example, accessing a SIM card, you need a national ID.
That's
so
right.
What it means is if you have no ID, then you will not be able to access the SIM card. So you will not be able to communicate freely and enjoy communication services like all other people. But then also acquiring a driver's license, this you will need an ID. So which means if you don't, then this is also going to impact on movement. Financial transactions, an ID is needed for you to open up an account. That's right. So if you don't have one, then it means you'll not be able to access financial services. So, and there are also other areas of life that are really affected by the fact that the IDs have been made mandatory. And if we continue with this mandatory requirement without options, viable options, and yet we have not yet attained universal access, this implies that there is a segment of the population, especially for those who can't afford, that will be excluded. Okay. Yeah. It's more like ring-fencing some people and then ensuring that the rest cannot. For example, if somebody wants a bank account, it doesn't have
to come down to age or the fact that you have an ID or not.
Yes.
I mean, you can have a bank account even if you're 6 years of age.
Yes,
And,
because you have guardians who
that's
can.
right.
Yes.
Now, let me first get to the core before we get to the nitty-gritty. Is there anything that has been benchmarked, especially one that we can refer to and say, for example, in Netherlands or in South Korea, this is how it is done? You talk about all options, alternative options. What do you mean and what do you want?
So in terms of options, is one is the fact that it should not be made mandatory as the only identification that one should use to access these different areas of our lives.
That's right.
We've seen the other jurisdictions, for example, India, South Africa. We do not only observe the cost of accessing an ID in their jurisdictions, but also the fact that there are alternatives. You may have a national ID, but it is also possible for you to use another form for you to identify yourself. Okay. Maybe a driver's license. But in our context and where we are heading, it is a mandatory requirement. So now where you have issues affecting access in form of, for example, one of actually the issues that we also highlight in the position paper is the steep costs in replacement, in the error charges for you to be able to make corrections. They are quite high.
Corrections you're not responsible for.
Correction, yes, you can imagine. Yes. So that then leads to some. There's a potential that some people are going to be excluded. Yeah. So we would love to see a situation whereby it is not that there is flexibility. It is not made mandatory until such a time. Making it mandatory is not bad, but let it be made when we've reached that time in point as a country when we have attained universal access.
That's right.
Yes.
Your report does delve into aspects about invasive data collection and unregulated surveillance as per the findings. Now, this is a spot of bother for the government because you have to be able to be on top of surveillance, understanding what is going on within the population, what kind of businesses and transactions are being undertaken by people, and it calls for the need to have your fingers on just about all aspects of the population, which presents a human rights concern. Now, within the concerns that you say this is fraught and that human rights concerns must be taken care of to allow for smooth operation. I do not know whether you have a specific set of recommendations that government can work within that are functional. What do you recommend in your paper?
In our paper, first of all, we urge the government, whereas we appreciate the effort that government has made in making sure that we realize access to a national ID, which was long awaited for, but the implementation thereof has not been without challenges. So one of the things that we recommend is for NIRA to undertake a data protection impact assessment. We believe that this is an opportunity that would not only give NIRA an opportunity to establish risks, risks that are bound to impact on the right to privacy, and as well as ethical use of data. It will also give them the opportunity to mount mitigating avenues to ensure that they counter the risks, and that at the end of the day, once the enrollment then is out, then there will be less infringement on people's right to privacy.
Okay.
That is one of the things that that needs to be urgently undertaken, even ahead of the mass enrollment. Yes, okay. And we also urge government to also adequately allocate resources to NIRA so that NIRA can undertake some of the key pertinent aspects of the implementation of the ID system, including resources for this data protection impact assessment, which is very, very crucial. It will go a long way, and it would help to address some of the human rights concerns that we have.
Okay. Have you interfaced with NIRA and associated agencies on data protection? Because we have a lot of data available to the government.
Yes.
You have your birth certificate, you have your exam certificates. At every step you're offering all the information, then you come to the driver's licenses, you have a passport, then you have a national ID. Every time you need to do something, there's a lot of renewal processes and you get to put in a lot of information. And there it creates a situation where there's a lot of data that could be mined by some unscrupulous individuals right there. Have you met, because as an organization, Unwanted Witness, I'm sure the vagaries of technology are not the things you grapple with like the average Chris Higenyi. So what are the available options that you have suggested for NIRA, the government, in order to address the key issue of data protection, because it's too much out there?
Yes. So one of the issues, apart from the impact assessment that needs to be undertaken, we are also recommending that there is a need to put in place adequate safeguards for data protection, to protect this data. We are also saying that the data that is collected, let it be we raise the issue of necessity. Let this data be necessary. There is no reason why you should collect up and above the data that you would ideally use for the ID, and even and then go beyond that, because then that puts a burden on NIRA in terms of making sure that this data is protected. Then there are other things that need to be in place that for them to continue retaining that data in terms of, for example, storage, in terms of the duration, for how long is it going to be held, and then also justification for this data. Why would you put yourself into a situation where you have to justify to collect this data? So we are saying there's a lot we can learn from other jurisdictions. For example, India. India has the system in place. The ID system is such that there is limited data that is collected, and we can actually learn from them as a country. Yes.
All right, that's very interesting. First, take us through the existing legal framework that allows for consolidation of data. Is it something you're comfortable with? What are the existing gaps, and how best can this be clogged? So I
want to add my voice, and we appreciate the fact that our ID system is rooted in a legal framework, both at international level and at the domestic level. In place, we have the Registration of Persons Act that is a key milestone for the country, and the fact that it establishes NIRA, which is the primary authority in charge of managing our ID system. But in addition to that, we also have in place the Data Protection and Privacy Act of 2019, and we also have the Data Protection and Privacy regulations as well. So those do give an overarching and help to regulate data protection, giving obligations and rights to data subjects, you and I, and as well as obligations in regard to those who interface with data, whether as a processor, whether as a collector, which need to be fulfilled. Also, because we do not exist in in a vacuum as a country, and we are part of the global village. We have signed and ratified key human rights instruments that definitely inform our identification system. For example, in the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, and as well as the UN Agenda on Identification, and we also have guidelines in place that do help to they are in place to help countries to guide in terms of development of identification systems.
Okay. Yeah. Where are we right now with regard to the, you talk about the fact that, for example, renewal is expensive. I can't afford renewing a national ID.
Actually, renewal has been waived.
It has been waived?
Yes, by the minister.
By the minister.
So
has it been put down into some kind of explicit piece of legislation? A minister can speak at a function and direct the RDC.
Actually, we are waiting to see that. We are waiting to see that, because apart from the waiver, whereas it's a welcome decision by the minister and NIRA at that. But we are waiting to see how it will be expressly provided for.
It has to be.
Yes, because that has not yet been done. I have not seen it anywhere. In fact, when you go to the website of NIRA, whereas the renewal fees have been waived, but when you look at the fees forms, the fees are still actually there. So that is it brings a little bit of confusion, yes, because if the minister already has waived, and then we are still seeing the fees in existence. For those who are not aware, they may think that actually renewal is still at excuse me, is still at a fee, and which is not the case.
That's one thing that I hope can be worked on as soon as possible. All right, we are nearing the final bend of this particular discussion.
Yes.
I want to go back to the report that you came up with, and I'm always concerned about data collection and the methods. You're already working within a system that you're complaining about, and it's the core of the tools that you used, of course, technology. And could you take us through the criteria and maybe offer us confidence that as we grapple with data consolidation on the part of NIRA and the government, it is something that you have effectively overcome as an organization?
We heavily rely, one of our program areas is research. We're a research-based organization. For this position paper, it was informed by both secondary data and as well as primary data that came in from time to time. So secondary data in form of we have the position paper comes as a building block on what we have previously done, previous works. We have two reports that we produced. In fact, we have two reports of our previous work. One is Chased Away and Left to Die. And we also had a preliminary report that we issued on Uganda's digital ID system. And we also have a policy paper that we came up with.
Okay. If you don't mind.
Yes. So this comes as a follow-up, given the additions that are coming into our ID infrastructure as a country. If you would well know that with the envisaged mass enrollment we envisage that there will be an upgrade or into a new generation ID which is being proposed. Also, there were also reports from the Auditor General's Office that were also making recommendations and highlighting issues of concern regarding the ID system. So all these things we put together and were analyzed. But then obviously also the position paper is also informed by the principles that are underpinning our domestic legal framework and as well as the international standards that we subscribe, we've signed and ratified as a country. And then also there have been also updates from the ministry, from NIRA as the primary administrator of the ID system, that also informed also the study and analysis. And obviously our comparing our ID system to those of our neighboring countries, the likes of Rwanda. When you look at the fees of replacement, in Rwanda, in India, the fees is just $1. For Uganda, it is 50,000. 50,000 for a country that is poor and with a big part of the population below the poverty line, earning below $1. A number of people are destined to be excluded. It will take about close to 8 days for you to be able to amass the 50,000. So
that is if you're
that is if you're even able to.
Interesting there.
Yes.
Wow. So. Many thanks for that perspective. Yeah, I don't know whether I'm allowed to retain this. Championing an inclusive, trustworthy and accountable approach to Uganda's ID infrastructure and the transition to a new generation ID.
Yes.
A position paper. I need to read it.
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Freda Nalumansi Mugambe. You are the Research and Advocacy Lead at Unwanted Witness Uganda. We are emboldened by your perspective and information that you have shared. I hope that whoever is seeking to undergo what NIRA requires you to do, of course, it is your civic duty to be able to get an ID. You must do that. The modalities and the challenges therein are being addressed by organizations like the Unwanted Witness Uganda, of course, in collaboration with other stakeholders as the nation seeks to consolidate data to allow for better national planning. Do stay with us. My man on the ground, Stephen Mbide, is standing by. He will be giving us an update on what's happening where he is when we return from the break.